sueur, the first 4 notes should not have existed. Constance Norcombe knew them before the second violin found the answering phrase, before the cellist leaned into the low, warm pulse beneath it, before a dozen silk-clad couples turned toward the polished floor of Denby House with smiles prepared for pleasure. Those notes belonged to a summer afternoon 3 years ago, to a locked music room, to Theodore Ketteridge's quiet voice telling her that the melody had been played at every private celebration in his family for nearly a century. They belonged to the silver tuning fork in her reticule and to the manuscript she had written in secret, believing some things could remain honorable simply because they had been made with love. Yet there they were, bright and graceful beneath the chandeliers, offered to half of London as entertainment at her sister's wedding. Constance did not move. Around her, the evening assembly flowed on in a shimmer of pale satin, white gloves, polished shoes, and candlelight trembling across gilt mirrors. The wedding itself had taken place that morning, with Felicity composed beneath her veil and Matthew Denby solemn before the altar. The breakfast had been generous, the speeches proper, and Lady Miriam had spent every hour ensuring no guest forgot that her younger daughter had married a baron. Now the chairs had been removed from the center of the long room. Musicians occupied the gallery above the western doors. Flowers from the breakfast remained in silver urns, their sweetness mingling with beeswax and warm bodies. Constance stood close enough to the musicians' staircase to observe the program she had arranged and far enough from the center to remain useful without becoming visible. It was a position she had perfected. Her gloved fingers closed over the shape of the tuning fork through the silk of her reticule. It had belonged to her mother before Lady Miriam became mistress of Norcombe House, and its small weight had steadied Constance through years of scales, corrections, copied passages, and melodies no one in her family thought worthy of a name. Earlier that evening, she had checked every piece with the leader of the musicians. This set had not been among them. "You look pale," Felicity whispered beside her. The new Lady Denby wore silver blue silk, and the calm expression of a bride who knew every eye remained indulgently upon her. A tiny spray of orange blossom still rested above one ear. "I'm perfectly well." Constance kept her gaze on the gallery. "Who added this?" Felicity's smile faltered. "Mamma said the guests would expect something fashionable." "Did she give it a name?" Felicity glanced toward Lady Miriam, who stood beneath the central chandelier receiving congratulations, as if she had personally elevated the Denby title, the Ketteridge Quadrille. The title struck more sharply than the melody. Constance had seen it once in a shop window 2 years before, engraved above the smaller line, arranged by B. Norcombe. She had not entered the shop. She had not needed to hold the printed pages to recognize the theft. By then, Theodore had already gone from London, and society had already decided that Miss Norcombe had transformed a duke's private confidence into fashionable profit. Sir Barnaby had accepted the admiration. Lady Miriam had accepted the invitations. Constance had accepted silence because every attempt to speak had been met with the same smooth correction. A daughter's talent belonged first to her family. A woman's protest was unbecoming. "You should have warned me," Constance said. Felicity's face tightened. "I didn't know until this afternoon. Mama said it would be childish to object after so long." Childish. The musicians reached the first variation. Constance had written it at 26, when hope still felt like a private form of courage. She had taken the old Ketteridge melody and opened it carefully. placing light between its formal phrases, allowing the final cadence to delay itself by one tender measure. Theodore had laughed softly when she first played the unfinished passage. Not because it was foolish, because she had startled him. You made it sound as though it had been waiting for someone, he had said. 3 weeks later, he had withdrawn from her without asking a single question. Constance. Lady Miriam's voice came from behind them, low enough to preserve appearances. Do not permit an old fancy to disturb your sister's evening. Constance turned. Her stepmother's gown was plum-colored silk, severe and faultless. Diamonds shone at her throat. Nothing in her expression suggested she heard stolen music. It was not an old fancy. Not here. Lady Miriam's smile remained in place for anyone watching. Today belongs to Felicity. You have spent weeks arranging everything beautifully. Do not spoil it by turning cleverness into display. I did not place this music before the guests. Then you have nothing to answer for. Lady Miriam's gaze dropped to Constance's reticule, as though even the outline of the tuning fork might be an act of rebellion. Stand quietly. Let the moment pass. The command might once have succeeded. Constance had spent years letting moments pass. She had allowed whispers to harden into reputation. She had allowed Sir Barnaby to accept praise for arrangements whose harmonies he could not have explained. She had allowed Felicity's prospects to become the reason no truth could be spoken. Yet now, the melody moved beneath the candles, and strangers stepped onto the floor to dance upon it. The first couples took their places. Gentlemen bowed, ladies curtsied. Someone near the refreshment table murmured, "Is that not the piece connected with Miss Norcombe?" Another voice answered. The elder one, yes, there was some awkwardness with Ketteridge before he left England. A third said, "I heard she sold the thing after he trusted her with it." Constance felt Felicity go rigid beside her. Lady Miriam did not turn toward the speakers. She merely lifted her chin, as if gossip were proof of her own innocence. The doors at the eastern end of the ballroom opened. Conversation shifted before the servant announced him. Power moved through a room differently from beauty. Beauty invited attention. Power rearranged it. Theodore Ketteridge, Duke of Ketteridge, entered in a black evening coat, cut with military precision, his linen stark beneath the candlelight. 3 years had sharpened him. His shoulders seemed broader, his expression more controlled, and the reserved society, once called coldness, had settled into something quieter and harder. He acknowledged Lord Denbigh first, then Felicity, according to rank and occasion. Only afterward did his gaze travel across the room. It found Constance before the musicians completed the phrase. She saw the exact moment he recognized the melody. His step stopped. The room continued around him, but the stillness in his face deepened. The second variation began, the one Constance had written for him alone. Theodore looked toward the musicians, then at the printed program in a guest's hand. His eyes returned to her. There was no accusation in them now. There was something more dangerous, doubt. Not doubt of her, doubt of what he had believed. Constance's hand tightened around the tuning fork until its narrow stem pressed into her palm through the reticule. Lady Miriam moved forward. "Your Grace, how kind of you to join us." Theodore bowed, but his attention did not leave the gallery. Who authorized this piece? The question was quiet. It nevertheless reached every person nearest them. Sir Barnaby appeared from the edge of the crowd, flushed from wine and congratulations. "A harmless tribute, Ketteridge. The thing has been admired for years." I asked who authorized it. The musicians continued uncertain. Theodore lifted one hand. He did not raise his voice. "Finish the phrase, if you please. Then stop." The leader obeyed. The violins carried the melody to its cadence, and silence fell so completely that Constance heard the faint snap of cooling wax in the nearest candle branch. Couples remained in their places. No one laughed. No one pretended not to watch. Lady Miriam's smile hardened. Surely there is no need to interrupt Felicity's first dance. There is every need if music has been placed before Miss Norcombe without her consent. It was the first time Theodore had spoken her name in her presence since 1816. Constance felt the sound of it like a door opening onto a room she had ordered herself never to enter again. Sir Barnaby gave a short laugh. "Consent? It is published music, my arrangement, as everyone knows." Theodore looked at him. "That is precisely what I no longer know." A murmur moved across the guests. Constance should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt exposed, as though Theodore had drawn a curtain aside before she had chosen whether to stand in the light. He turned toward her. For one suspended moment, neither of them spoke. She saw regret in the set of his mouth, but regret was not an answer. She saw recognition, but recognition had come 3 years too late. The musicians waited. The dancers waited. Society waited most eagerly of all. Theodore crossed the floor. He stopped at the proper distance and bowed. When he straightened, his voice was formal enough for the room and low enough to belong to her. "Miss Norcombe, may I have the next quadrille?" Constance looked at the hand he had not yet offered. He had given her the courtesy of asking first. But the room had already turned the question into a spectacle. Every face near the floor had tilted toward them. Even the musicians seemed to be holding their breath above the gallery rail. Theodore waited with the stillness of a man accustomed to having silence work in his favor. Once, that composure had made her feel safe. Now it reminded her how easily he had left without demanding the truth. "No, Your Grace." The words were not loud, yet they traveled farther than the music had. Someone near the doorway drew a quick breath. Felicity's fingers tightened around her fan. Sir Barnaby's flushed face hardened, while Lady Miriam's expression remained composed enough to be mistaken for patience. Theodore did not move. He did not offer his hand. He only inclined his head, accepting the refusal before society could accuse her of discourtesy. Of course. Constance might have ended it there. She could have stepped back, surrendered the floor to Felicity, and allowed the guests to turn her refusal into another version of the old story. The embittered elder sister, the woman who had once reached above her place and now punished a duke for escaping her. Lady Miriam moved before Constance could decide. "Your Grace, my daughter is overcome by the surprise." She did not intend to answer so abruptly. Constance turned toward her. "I intended every word." The smile vanished from Lady Miriam's eyes. Constance. It was not her name. It was a warning polished by years of use. "This is Felicity's wedding celebration. I am aware of that." Constance kept her voice even. "I arranged it." A faint ripple passed through the guests. Theodore's gaze remained on her face. He looked neither offended nor impatient. That almost made the moment harder. If he had been cold, she could have hated him cleanly. Instead, there was a strain beneath his restraint, as though he had spent 3 years rehearsing a speech and had just discovered that none of its words would serve. Constance looked at him fully. "Before I dance with you, answer me. Why did you believe every man who profited from my work before you believed the woman who made it?" The question struck the room with greater force than any raised voice could have done. Sir Barnaby took a step forward. "That is enough." Theodore lifted one hand without looking away from Constance. "No, it is not." His tone stopped Sir Barnaby more effectively than a command. Then Theodore turned slightly, not toward the guests, but enough that those nearest could hear him. "I received an engraved proof sheet 3 years ago. It contained corrections in Miss Norcombe's hand. Her father's name appeared as arranger and authorized proprietor. I believed those corrections proved her consent to the publication." Constance felt the old humiliation rise through her, but now it met something sharper than pain. "My consent, that was what I believed. You never asked." "No." The single word carried no defense. Lady Miriam intervened with a soft laugh. "Surely we are not to turn an innocent publishing confusion into an inquest." Constance corrected a musical proof. Sir Barnaby handled the business. It was all done within the family. "You told me the proof was for a private presentation copy," Constance said. For the first time, Lady Miriam's composure shifted, only slightly, a pause before her answer, a tightening around the mouth. "You must have misunderstood." "I did not." Constance heard the steadiness in her own voice and trusted it. "You brought the pages to the morning room. You said the copy was meant for His Grace, and that my corrections would preserve the music as I had written it. You never mentioned a publisher. You never mentioned payment. You never mentioned that my name would be removed." The room seemed to contract around them. Theodore's expression changed, not with surprise alone, but with the first visible fracture in something he had long accepted as fact. "The proof sheet bears your corrections," he said quietly. "Yes, but you believed it was for me." "Yes, and you did not authorize commercial publication." "No." Sir Barnaby gave an impatient exhale. "This is absurd. She wrote music beneath my roof. She accepted the protection of my household. I saw no reason to burden her with matters of printing and accounts." Constance turned to him. "You saw no reason to burden me with my own name." Felicity moved closer, her color fading beneath the candlelight. "Papa, perhaps this should be discussed tomorrow." "It will not be discussed at all." Sir Barnaby's voice sharpened. The matter was settled years ago. Theodore finally looked at him. "By whom?" Sir Barnaby's mouth closed. It was a small silence, but everyone heard it. Lady Miriam stepped between the question and the answer with practiced grace. "Your Grace, whatever impression you formed then, Constance suffered no lasting harm. The composition was admired. Sir Barnaby received the credit proper to the head of the family. My daughter remained protected from public scrutiny." Constance almost laughed. Protected. The word had been used so often to describe the walls around her that no one had noticed they were also a prison. Theodore's face went still again, but the stillness had changed. It no longer shielded him. It restrained anger. "Miss Norcombe was accused of profiting from a private confidence," he said. "Society repeated it because I withdrew from London without correcting the implication. That is lasting harm." A murmur moved across the room. Lady Miriam's chin lifted. "You could hardly have corrected what you believed to be true." "I could have asked whether it was true." Theodore looked back at Constance. "I did not." The admission left nowhere for him to hide. No diplomatic phrasing softened it. No mention of the proof sheet excused it. Constance felt the force of it, but she did not allow relief to become forgiveness. "Why?" she asked. Theodore's gaze dropped for one brief moment, then returned to hers. "Because the sheet confirmed what I feared, which was that you had valued the connection more than the trust between us." Pain crossed his face, restrained but unmistakable. "I saw your handwriting beside your father's claim. I told myself the evidence was sufficient. The truth is that I was afraid to hear you say you had chosen notoriety over what had passed between us. So you chose the answer that wounded your pride less. Yes. The honesty silenced even Sir Barnaby. Constance remembered the letter Theodore had sent before leaving London. Formal, controlled, final. He had written that certain misunderstandings were best allowed to end before they deepened. She had read those lines until they became proof that every quiet conversation, every shared melody, and every look across a crowded room had meant more to her than to him. Now she understood that he had been wounded too. The knowledge did not repair anything. It only made the ruins more human. Lady Miriam drew herself upright. This is becoming indecent. No, Theodore said. It was indecent 3 years ago. Tonight it is merely visible. Constance heard a suppressed sound from somewhere behind Lady Miriam. Perhaps shock, perhaps satisfaction. Theodore did not glance toward it. His attention remained on Constance. You asked why I believed others before I believed you. The answer is that their account protected me from uncertainty. I accepted it because I lacked the courage to ask you directly. That failure was mine. He paused. It remains mine. Lady Miriam opened her fan with a sharp movement. Then, surely Miss Norcombe may accept your apology and allow the evening to continue. She owes me neither a dance nor an apology, Theodore said. Nor does she owe me forgiveness, because I have finally named what I did. The words settled over Constance with a weight different from the gossip that had burdened her for years. Society watched her now, but Theodore had removed the expectation that she reward him for honesty. He had left the choice where it belonged. She turned toward Felicity. Her sister's eyes were bright with distress, though whether for Constance, herself, or the wedding, Constance could not tell. The musicians may continue, Constance said, with another piece. Felicity nodded quickly and signaled the leader. Pages shifted in the gallery. Couples withdrew from the floor, whispering behind fans and gloves as a country dance was selected instead. Sir Barnaby escorted Lady Miriam away before either could say more. Their retreat was not surrender. Constance knew them too well for that. Theodore remained where he was. The proof sheet, she said. Do you still have it? Yes. Where? In a locked portfolio in the music archive at Ketteridge House. His answer came without hesitation. It has not left my possession since 1816. Constance studied him. I want to see it. You shall, with a chaperone, of course, and I will decide what happens after I have examined it. Theodore bowed. Entirely. The musicians began the new set. Conversation resumed, though no one pretended the evening had returned to what it had been. Theodore stepped back, giving her the space he had once denied her. Constance stood beside Felicity, beneath the chandeliers. The silver tuning fork still closed within her reticule, and the stolen quadrille silent at last. Tomorrow, she would see the paper that had judged her without ever asking her to speak. By 11 the next morning, Constance stood beneath the pale ceiling of Ketteridge House with her blue-bound composition notebook pressed against her ribs, and Lord Denby's widowed aunt seated 3 chairs away beside the cold fireplace. The older lady had accepted the role of chaperone with brisk discretion. She had asked no questions during the short carriage journey from Denby House, although the newspapers had not yet carried the previous evening's scandal, and half of Mayfair already seemed to know it. Theodore had received them in a smaller morning room rather than the formal drawing room. No musicians had ever performed there. No portraits of powdered ancestors watched from the walls. Only a narrow pianoforte, 2 cabinets of scores, and a locked oak door at the far end suggested why he had chosen it. Constance had not returned to Ketteridge House since 1816. Then she had entered with hope carefully hidden beneath propriety. Today she entered carrying evidence of work no one had been permitted to call hers. Theodore remained standing until both ladies were seated. His black coat and restrained manner were as formal as the visit required. But he had not slept well. She saw it in the faint shadow beneath his eyes and in the stillness of his hands. Once she would have mistaken that stillness for certainty. "The proof is in the archive," he said. "I haven't opened the portfolio since last night." The chaperone glanced toward the oak door. "Then perhaps we ought to see it before London invents 3 more versions of what happened." Theodore crossed to the door and drew a small key from his waistcoat pocket. The lock yielded with a muted click. Beyond it lay a narrow chamber lined with shelves. Leather portfolios stood upright beneath labels written in a precise hand. He removed one marked Private Music, 1814 to 1817, carried it to the central table and placed it before Constance without opening it. "You may break the ribbon." The faded blue ribbon had been tied in a flat knot. Constance set her notebook beside the portfolio and pulled one end free. Theodore did not touch either object. Inside were several family arrangements, a small bundle of correspondence, and a cream sheet protected by tissue. The engraved title at the top read The Ketteridge Quadrille. Beneath it appeared the smaller words arranged by B. Norcombe. Constance had imagined this page for 3 years. She had imagined tearing it, burning it, forcing Sir Barnaby to look at it while she demanded an explanation. The actual sheet seemed almost ordinary. That was the cruelty of paper. It could carry a theft without changing weight. "This is the copy the publisher sent me," Theodore said. "It arrived before the public edition." Constance bent over the sheet. Pencil marks ran through the engraved lines. Her marks. She recognized the narrow angle of her wrists and the way she curved a slur too sharply when impatient. Beside the second variation, she had written, "Reduce the left hand here." The melody must remain clear. Her chest tightened. "I wrote these corrections in the morning room at Norcombe House." "Lady Miriam gave you the sheet?" "Yes." "She said it was a presentation proof for you." "Constance touched nothing. She told me your copy was being privately engraved, and that the workman had misunderstood several passages." Theodore stood opposite her. "Did you know your father's name appeared beneath the title?" "Not when I corrected it." She covered the lower part with another page. The chaperone's fan stopped moving. "That was deliberate. It appears so." Constance examined the proof more closely. The printer's routing mark sat in the lower margin, followed by a date in June 1816. Her gaze moved to the 3rd page. One correction had been crossed out in pencil, but the engraved notes beneath had not been changed. "Here." Theodore leaned forward, then checked himself before entering her space. "May I? You may look." He moved to her side, leaving a respectful distance. Constance pointed to the baseline. "I changed this progression. The first version makes the cadence too heavy. My correction is written above it, but the commercial edition still used the original passage." "You remember the printed edition?" "I heard it last night." She looked at him. "I would remember a mistake made in my own work." His jaw tightened, not at her answer, but at himself. "If you had approved the final commercial proof, the correction would have been carried through." "Exactly." The chaperone leaned nearer. Then, whoever submitted the page did so after Miss Norcombe had written upon it, but before the engraver completed the final plate. "Yes," Constance said, and without returning it to me. Theodore studied the routing mark. The publisher might still have a ledger or correspondence. I can ask my solicitor to arrange an examination. Constance closed the tissue over the proof, but not the portfolio. You can ask after I agree to it. He met her eyes. Of course, and I receive every answer when you do. At the same time. Not afterward, once you've decided what will spare me distress. Words landed between them with more force than she intended. Theodore did not defend himself. At the same time, he repeated. Constance opened her blue notebook. The binding had faded along the spine, and one corner had softened from years of use. She turned to the first dated sketches. Spring 1816. The original Ketteridge theme appeared in her hand, followed by variations added over several weeks. Some measures were crossed out. Others were rewritten 3 or 4 times. The final shape emerged visibly from the discarded attempts. Theodore looked down at the pages as though he had been granted entrance to a private room. You kept all of it. It was mine. Yes, the answer came quietly. No hesitation. Constance turned another page. A notation in the margin recorded the day Theodore had first heard the unfinished second variation. She closed the notebook before he could read the line beneath it. This establishes that I developed the work before publication. It establishes far more than that. It establishes enough. He accepted the boundary. For several moments, the only sound was the chaperone's fan beginning to move again. Theodore looked at the proof sheet, then at Constance's closed notebook. When I received this, I saw your handwriting beside your father's name. I thought I understood what had happened. You thought I had taken something private and sold it. Yes, his face tightened. I thought you had allowed me to speak of my family, because you intended to turn the confidence into advantage. Did that seem like me? No. The answer was immediate, which made the next words harder. That should have mattered more than the paper. Constance held his gaze. But it didn't. I was afraid. She had heard him admit pride the night before. Fear was different. Pride built walls. Fear explained why a man might hide behind them. It did not excuse him. Of what? That I had mistaken what passed between us, that I had been wanted for my name and was too foolish to see it. He looked toward the silent pianoforte. The proof gave that fear a shape I could call evidence. So you left before I could contradict it. I left because I was a coward who preferred certainty, even a cruel certainty, to the possibility of hearing you reject me. Constance's fingers tightened around the notebook. Your fear became my sentence. I know. No. You're beginning to know. Theodore accepted the correction with a small bow of his head. He reached toward the portfolio, then stopped. The proof will remain here unless you authorize its movement. I can have my solicitor come to Ketteridge House, or we can take it to the publisher with a written receipt and witnesses. It remains here for now. Agreed. Constance rose, and the chaperone rose with her. Theodore retied the ribbon loosely, then returned the portfolio to the archive and locked the door. When he came back, he held the key where she could see it, before replacing it in his waistcoat pocket. The routing mark names the music house, he said. I recognized the initials. Their premises are on the Strand. Constance picked up her notebook. Then tomorrow we go to the Strand. Theodore did not say he would handle it. He did not say he would protect her from what they might find. He only answered, yes. Together, the Strand smelled of wet stone, ink, horse sweat, and the sharp metallic dust of trades conducted behind narrow windows. Constance stepped from Lord Denby's carriage with the blue-bound notebook, secured beneath one arm while his widowed aunt descended after her with the grave patience of a woman who understood that propriety could be maintained without pretending nothing serious was occurring. Theodore arrived from Ketteridge House in a separate carriage with his solicitor. The annotated proof sheet remained locked in the music archive, exactly where Constance had required it to stay. They had brought only Theodore's written description of its routing mark and the date recorded in its lower margin. The publisher's premises occupied 2 floors above a shop crowded with sheet music, instrument strings, and printed songs displayed behind glass. The name, the Ketteridge Quadrille, appeared in the window between a patriotic march and a comic air. Beneath the title, the engraved credit still read, arranged by B. Norcombe. Constance looked at it once and then entered. The proprietor received a duke with nervous efficiency. He bowed too deeply to Theodore, bowed again to the ladies, and led them upstairs to a cramped office where ledgers filled one wall and bundles of printed sheets leaned against a cabinet. The room smelled of paper, sealing wax, and lamp oil. Theodore waited until Constance had chosen her seat before taking his own. "We're here to examine the business record for the Ketteridge Quadrille," he said. The publisher's eyes moved from Theodore to Constance and back again. "Of course, Your Grace, though I must say the arrangement was entirely proper as it was presented to us." "That is what we are here to determine," Constance said. The man flushed. Theodore did not answer for her. The solicitor placed a clean notebook on the desk. "We require the contract, the payment entry, and any correspondence concerning delivery of the manuscript or corrected proof." The publisher hesitated. "Those papers are 3 years old. Then they have had ample time to settle into the correct drawer," Lord Denby's aunt observed. The publisher gave a startled cough, then crossed to the ledger wall. He removed a thick volume dated 1816 and laid it on the desk. Dust marked the leather, but the pages inside were orderly. He turned past songs, country dances, and military airs until his finger stopped beside an entry written in brown ink. The title appeared first, "The Ketteridge Quadrille." Beneath it stood the words, "Manuscript supplied and arrangement claimed by Sir Barnaby Norcombe, Baronet." A sum followed. Constance read it twice. The amount was not a fortune, but it was enough to prove intention. Her father had not merely accepted praise after an accident. He had sold what was hers. "The payment went to Sir Barnaby?" she asked. "Yes, Miss Norcombe." The publisher cleared his throat. He represented himself as arranger and proprietor. A gentleman of his position gave us no reason to question the claim. "Did you ask who composed the variations?" "Sir Barnaby said the work had been developed within his household." "That was not my question." The man shifted. "No, we didn't ask." Theodore's expression did not change, but Constance saw recognition pass through it. Another man had trusted her father's rank because asking more would have been inconvenient. Theodore had done the same. The solicitor requested the contract. The publisher unlocked a cabinet and removed a narrow packet tied with string. He opened it himself, leaving the original on his side of the desk while the solicitor examined it without taking possession. Sir Barnaby's signature appeared at the bottom. He had identified himself as arranger and authorized proprietor of the work. There was no mention of Constance, no signature in her hand, no separate declaration granting him permission. "Who delivered the manuscript?" Constance asked. The publisher's gaze dropped to a notation at the top of the first page. "Lady Miriam Norcombe brought the fair copy." The words struck with less surprise than the proof sheet had, but more certainty. Lady Miriam had not merely passed along a page, she misunderstood. She had carried the manuscript into a commercial house, presented her husband's claim, and watched Constance's name disappear. "Did she also deliver the corrected proof?" Theodore asked. "Yes, Your Grace." "She returned it in person. Did she say Miss Norcombe had approved the publication?" "She said the family had settled the matter and that Miss Norcombe did not wish to be troubled with business correspondence." Constance looked at the man. "Did it not occur to you that the person whose handwriting covered the proof might have wished to know what was being printed?" He winced. "At the time, Miss Norcombe, I believed I was dealing properly with the head of your family." "You were dealing conveniently with him." Silence followed. Theodore turned toward the contract, the original title. The publisher blinked. "Your Grace, was the Ketteridge quadrille the title on the manuscript when it arrived?" The man reached for a second ledger, thinner than the first. After several moments, he found a workshop note. "No, the copyist recorded it as variations for TK." Constance felt something inside her go still. That title had been private. She had written it at the top of the fair copy because she had not yet dared to write Theodore's full name. The initials had been enough. Lady Miriam had seen them and understood exactly what the work meant. "Who changed it?" Constance asked. "Sir Barnaby's instruction was to call it the Ketteridge quadrille," he said. "The ducal association would improve subscription." Theodore looked down at the line, and the restraint in his face sharpened into shame. His family melody had been turned into advertisement. Her affection had been turned into merchandise. "May we see the printer's working notes?" Constance asked. The publisher searched another bundle and produced several slips. None contained her name. One recorded that a correction in the third passage had not been transferred before the plate was finalized. Constance recognized the location at once. "That is the cadence I marked on the proof at Ketteridge House yesterday," she said. "The commercial edition preserved the error." The solicitor nodded, which supports Miss Norcombe's account that the corrected proof was not returned to her for final approval. "It supports more than that," Theodore said. "It shows her corrections were treated as labor while her authorship was denied." Constance turned toward him. 3 years earlier, he had seen the same handwriting and called it consent. Now he saw what the handwriting had been used to conceal. He did not ask her to acknowledge the change in him. He only faced the publisher again. "You will preserve every original record, naturally, Your Grace, and you will provide certified copies to Miss Norcombe's representative and to mine at the same time." The publisher looked toward Constance. "Yes, of course." Constance closed her notebook without opening it. She had brought it in case she needed to prove the composition had grown beneath her hand. Today, the villain's own records had spoken first. The publisher accompanied them downstairs, apologizing more with every step. Constance offered him no comfort. On the pavement, traffic pressed close along the Strand. A delivery cart turned sharply from the curb, its wheel passing nearer than the driver intended. Theodore stepped toward Constance, then stopped himself from seizing her arm. He extended his hand instead. "May I?" She looked at the open palm, gloved and still. The question mattered more than the gesture. Constance placed her hand in his and stepped up into the carriage. His fingers closed only enough to steady her. The moment both feet were secure, he released her. Before the door could be shut, the publisher hurried from the shop with a loose page in his hand. "Your Grace, Miss Norcombe, there is another matter." Constance turned. "What matter?" He looked mortified. Sir Barnaby submitted a second quadrille 3 days ago. It is awaiting rehearsal. The blue notebook seemed to grow heavier beneath her arm. What is it called? The publisher swallowed. Summer Lanterns. The name left the publisher's mouth and seemed to strike the carriage door between them. Summer Lanterns. Constance did not answer at once. The afternoon traffic continued along the Strand, wheels grinding over damp stone, while drivers called to one another above the noise. Lord Denby's widowed aunt had already settled opposite her. Theodore remained on the pavement beside the open carriage, one hand resting against the doorframe without touching it. The publisher stood behind him, still holding the loose page. "You are certain?" Constance asked. "Yes, Miss Norcombe, a new quadrille in 4 sets. Sir Barnaby said it had been prepared for the autumn subscriptions." "Who delivered it?" "I did not receive the manuscript myself. My clerk entered it 3 days ago." "Was the composer named?" The publisher's discomfort deepened. It was submitted under the same arrangement credit, B. Norcombe. Constance felt the blue notebook against her arm. Summer Lanterns had not been finished. She had written the opening for Felicity's wedding season, not for the wedding itself, and had set it aside when the final bridge refused to resolve. The fair copy had disappeared from her portfolio 3 weeks earlier. Lady Miriam had suggested a careless maid might have moved it. Sir Barnaby had laughed when Constance asked whether anyone had taken it. She had believed neither of them, but she had lacked proof and lacked the strength to begin another battle over paper that no one admitted belonged to her. "Has it been engraved?" Theodore asked. "Not fully, Your Grace. A rehearsal copy was prepared from the manuscript. The invitation rehearsal is scheduled for Hanover Square Rooms." "When?" Constance asked. 3 evenings from now." Theodore looked at her, but he did not issue an instruction. "What do you want done?" That question, simple as it was, steadied her more than the open carriage or the chaperone waiting within it. 3 years ago, he had decided what her handwriting meant. Today, he waited for her meaning. "Preserve the manuscript, the clerk's entry, and every rehearsal copy," she said to the publisher. "Do not cancel anything yet." His eyebrows rose. "You wish the rehearsal to proceed?" "I wish to know what they submitted." "Of course." He bowed quickly. "Nothing will be altered." Theodore nodded to the solicitor. "You heard Miss Norcombe?" "I did." The publisher withdrew at last. Theodore's attention remained on Constance. "Do you want me to confront Sir Barnaby?" "No." "Do you want me present when you do?" She considered the question. "Yes, but not as my answer." "I understand." Constance entered the carriage. The door closed, leaving Theodore on the pavement until his own conveyance drew forward. During the return to Denby House, she held the notebook in her lap and did not open it. The silver tuning fork remained inside her reticule, its familiar weight pressing against her wrist whenever the carriage turned. By the time they reached Mayfair, Constance had decided that she would not wait until Hanover Square to force the truth into the open. The following morning, Norcombe House received them with all the cold perfection of a place pretending nothing had changed. Sir Barnaby stood before the drawing-room fire, though the day was mild. Lady Miriam sat near the window, with a household account book open beside her. Felicity had come at Constance's request and occupied the edge of a settee, still dressed in the pale grey appropriate for a newly married woman making morning calls. Theodore stood near the mantel. Lord Denby's widowed aunt sat within clear view of everyone, her presence making privacy impossible and impropriety equally so. Constance placed the blue notebook on a small table and kept her hand upon it. Summer Lanterns was submitted to the Strand publisher 3 days ago. Sir Barnaby did not feign surprise. Then the man has been efficient. The fair copy disappeared from my portfolio. It was not lost. No, it was taken. Lady Miriam closed the account book. Constance, must you turn every family matter into accusation? Only the matters that begin with my work and end with someone else's name. Sir Barnaby crossed one ankle over the other. You wrote the piece in my house, with paper bought from my accounts, while supported by my income. It was created for family use. I wrote it under my roof. A roof does not compose music. Felicity lowered her eyes. Lady Miriam's voice softened into the tone she reserved for corrections delivered as kindness. An unmarried gentlewoman does not seek public notice for every accomplishment. The piece will be performed. The family will be admired. You will benefit from that admiration without exposing yourself to scrutiny. My name has already been exposed to scrutiny. It was simply removed from the page first. You exaggerate. The publisher has Sir Barnaby's contract for the first quadrille and his payment entry. Lady Miriam delivered the corrected proof herself. Silence sharpened the room. Sir Barnaby looked toward Theodore as if the Duke's rank might still be persuaded to defend male convenience. This is domestic business, Ketteridge. It concerns a work based upon a melody from my family, Theodore said. That made it my concern 3 years ago. Miss Norcombe's authorship makes it hers now. Lady Miriam turned to Constance. Felicity has been married less than a week. Do you understand what public talk of theft and female ambition could do to her position? Felicity flinched. Constance saw it and felt the old instinct rise. Protect the younger sister. Absorb the injury. Preserve the household peace. Then she remembered the printed title in the publisher's window and the line where her name should have been. Felicity's marriage cannot require my disappearance. No one is asking you to disappear, Lady Miriam said. You are asking me to remain useful while invisible. Sir Barnaby's face reddened. That is enough. The manuscript was in my house. I authorized its use. The matter ends there. It does not. Constance opened the notebook. Pages of drafts showed summer lanterns developing across the past 2 months. The opening melody appeared first in a narrow line, followed by the fuller dance rhythm. The final section stopped midway through a bridge. The fair copy you submitted is incomplete. Sir Barnaby's gaze flicked toward the pages. A competent arranger can complete it. Then perhaps that arranger will explain why the second phrase requires the answer written here. Constance removed the silver tuning fork from her reticule. She struck it lightly against the wooden edge of the table. The pure note sounded through the room. She carried it to the pianoforte, found the pitch, and played the opening of Summer Lanterns. The melody began brightly, with the lift of evening lamps appearing one by one beyond a garden terrace. Theodore stood motionless as she moved into the unfinished bridge. Constance stopped before the missing resolution. Then she played the passage she had drafted only in the notebook, allowing the inner voice to rise beneath the melody and return it gently home. The final chord faded. Theodore's expression had changed. You played that passage before, he said. At Ketteridge House? No. At Lady Merrow's musicale in July, before the guests arrived. You were at the instrument when I entered the room. Constance remembered. She had believed he was speaking to another guest in the doorway and had stopped after only 8 measures. That was weeks before the publisher received the manuscript, he said. Sir Barnaby's mouth tightened. Memory is not evidence. It is not the only evidence, Theodore replied. Her dated notebook exists. Your publisher's entry exists. The incomplete fair copy exists. The question is how it left her portfolio. Constance looked at Felicity. Her sister's hands had closed around each other. You know something. Lady Miriam turned sharply. Felicity, you are not required to indulge this performance. Felicity's face went pale, but she lifted her eyes to Constance. 3 weeks ago, I saw Mama leaving your room with a music folio beneath her shawl. Lady Miriam rose. You saw nothing of the kind. I did. Felicity's voice trembled, yet it did not fail. I asked whether it belonged to Constance. You said it was needed for the wedding arrangements. Constance looked at her stepmother. Where did you take it? Lady Miriam's composure returned piece by piece, to a place where it could be made useful. It was already useful. Constance closed the notebook. It was mine. Theodore did not step in front of her. He remained where she could see him, powerful enough to command the room and restrained enough not to claim it. Sir Barnaby moved toward the door. This discussion is finished. No, Constance said. It has only reached the part you did not write. Felicity drew a breath. There is to be a rehearsal at Hanover Square Rooms, isn't there? Constance met her sister's frightened gaze. Yes, then they'll play it under Papa's name. They will try. Constance returned the tuning fork to her reticule and took the notebook into her arms. The melody no longer felt stolen merely because someone else possessed the fair copy. Its missing bridge remained with her. So did its history. So did the choice of what would happen next. The declaration arrived before breakfast, folded beneath Sir Barnaby's seal and placed beside Constance's untouched tea as though it were an invitation rather than an erasure. She read it once. Then she read the final paragraph again. All musical compositions created by Miss Constance Norcombe within Norcombe House had been intended for family use, developed under paternal authority, and transferred voluntarily to Sir Barnaby Norcombe for arrangement, publication, and profit. A space waited beneath the statement for her signature. Lady Miriam sat at the opposite end of the table, composed in dove-grey silk. Sir Barnaby stood near the window, with both hands clasped behind his back. Felicity had arrived from Denby House before the tray was cleared, summoned by a note she had not been permitted to refuse. Theodore was not yet present. Constance suspected her father preferred the document signed before a duke could witness the method by which agreement was obtained. You will sign before noon, Sir Barnaby said. The rehearsal is tomorrow evening. I will not have uncertainty attached to the family name. Constance laid the paper flat. There is no uncertainty. I did not transfer my work to you. The declaration clarifies the arrangement. It invents one. Lady Miriam lifted her cup. Do not be theatrical. Your father is offering you protection from a public dispute you cannot control. He is asking me to certify the theft. Felicity's face tightened. Constance, perhaps the wording could be changed. Sir Barnaby turned on her. You will not interfere. Felicity lowered her gaze, but she did not leave. Constance noticed that small act of resistance. 3 years ago, her sister would have escaped the room at the first sign of conflict. Now she remained seated, pale and frightened, with her wedding ring visible against the white handle of her cup. Lady Miriam regarded Constance with the patience one might offer a stubborn child. If this becomes public, people will not admire your courage. They will question your modesty. They will say you, pursued His Grace, used a private family melody and now wish to make a spectacle because he has returned. They have said worse while I remained silent. And Felicity, Lady Miriam asked, Do you intend to drag your sister's new marriage through the same gossip? Felicity looked up. Pain moved across her face, and Constance felt the old pressure close around her heart. Every family injury had always been placed beside Felicity's future, as though Constance's dignity were the only currency available to purchase her sister's safety. My marriage should not require her lie, Felicity said. Sir Barnaby stared at her. You are a bride of 6 days. You understand nothing of what a marriage requires. Matthew knows about the manuscript. You told him. Lady Miriam's voice lost its softness. Felicity's fingers trembled, but she held them together. I told him what I saw. Sir Barnaby struck the folded declaration against the table. Enough. Constance will sign. The rehearsal will proceed. This unpleasantness will end. Constance rose. The motion was quiet, yet it changed the room. No. Her father's face darkened. You mistake my patience for weakness, and you mistake support for ownership. She gathered the declaration and carried it to the small escritoire near the wall. For one instant, Sir Barnaby seemed to think she meant to obey. Constance placed the paper beside the inkstand, but did not take up the pen. You may keep the rooms in which I wrote, she said. You may keep the paper paid for from household accounts. You may keep every compliment given to you by people who never asked whether you could compose a single measure. You may not keep my name. Lady Miriam set down her cup with deliberate care. Do you imagine a duke's attention will support you forever? This is not about his grace. Everything became about him the moment you refused him before half of London. No, that was the first moment I refused to let him decide for me. The door opened before Lady Miriam could answer. Theodore entered with Lord Denby's widowed aunt, who had plainly insisted upon accompanying him. He bowed to the ladies, then to Sir Barnaby. His gaze passed over the unsigned declaration and settled on Constance. He did not ask what had happened. He waited for her to speak. Sir Barnaby moved first. This is a private family matter. Then I will leave if Miss Norcombe wishes it, Theodore said. Do you? Constance looked at him. He had given her the choice in front of everyone. No, stay. Sir Barnaby's mouth tightened. You encourage defiance. I have said nothing. Your presence says enough. Then perhaps your method requires privacy because it cannot survive witnesses. Theodore's voice remained level, but the words landed hard. Constance handed him nothing. She did not need him to read the declaration or denounce it. She faced her father herself. I will not sign. Then you will no longer receive an allowance from this house. Felicity inhaled sharply. Lady Miriam did not move. The threat had been prepared in advance. You will surrender the rooms you occupy, Sir Barnaby continued. You will leave before evening, and you will take only what is unquestionably your own. Constance felt the room tilt, not from surprise, but from the sudden reality of what she had already chosen. Norcombe House had never been gentle. Yet it contained the bed where she had slept since girlhood, the window where she had written her first melody, and the cupboard where her mother's few remaining possessions had been stored. Leaving would cost more than comfort. That was why he had chosen it as punishment. Very well, she said. Lady Miriam's composure broke. Do not be absurd. Your father is giving you an opportunity to reconsider. He has given me clarity. Felicity stood. She can come to Denby House. Sir Barnaby turned toward her. You will ask your husband before making such an offer. I already did. For the first time that morning, Felicity's voice did not shake. Matthew said she may stay as long as she chooses. Constance looked at her sister. Gratitude rose beside grief, but she kept both from weakening her answer. Thank you. Theodore stepped forward only after Constance had accepted Felicity's offer. "My carriage is available if you require transport. Lord Denby's carriage will take us," Felicity said. Theodore inclined his head. "Then I will not intrude." Constance met his eyes. "You may accompany us as far as Denby House if my sister agrees." Felicity nodded. "I agree." The next 2 hours passed with painful efficiency. Constance packed without entering any room that did not belong to her. She took plain gowns, gloves, personal letters, the blue-bound composition notebook, and the silver tuning fork. She left the household music. Even the pieces copied in her own hand when the paper had come from Sir Barnaby's accounts. She would not allow him to claim she had stolen from the family while defending herself against theft. Lady Miriam did not come upstairs. Felicity helped fold the final dress. Lord Denby's aunt supervised the servants with brisk authority and prevented questions. Theodore waited below when Constance descended, carrying the notebook against her chest and the reticule at her wrist. Sir Barnaby stood in the hall. "Once you pass that door, you will not return until you are prepared to behave as my daughter." Constance stopped before him. "I have behaved as your daughter for 29 years. I am leaving because you never learned to behave as my father." She walked out before he could answer. The afternoon had turned cold. Lord Denby's carriage waited at the curb, Felicity already seated opposite the chaperone. Theodore stood beside the open door. He did not reach for Constance's belongings. He did not tell her she was safe now. Such words would have been too easy. He only offered his hand to assist her inside. Constance accepted. His fingers closed around hers with careful strength, then released when she had settled. Theodore entered last and took the place beside the chaperone, leaving Constance next to Felicity. The carriage moved away from Norcombe House. Constance watched the familiar facade pass beyond the window and disappear behind a line of other Mayfair houses. Her breath remained steady until the corner turned. Then the loss reached her. She looked down before anyone could mistake grief for regret. Theodore said nothing. After a moment, he removed one glove and rested his bare hand on the seat between them, palm upward. He did not touch her. He did not ask. The gesture remained an offer she could refuse without explanation. Constance stared at that open hand. 3 years ago, he had closed himself against uncertainty. Today, he waited inside it. She removed her glove one finger at a time and placed her hand in his. Theodore's fingers folded gently around hers. He did not tighten his hold when the carriage jolted, nor did he use comfort as permission to draw nearer. Felicity looked toward the opposite window. The chaperone adjusted the blanket across her knees. No one spoke for the rest of the journey. Constance kept the notebook against her side and the tuning fork inside her reticule. Everything that remained truly hers traveled with her. When Denby House came into view, Theodore was still holding her hand exactly as she had allowed him to hold it. The invitation rehearsal at Hanover Square Rooms began beneath a ceiling painted with pale clouds and gilded borders. But no one entered that evening expecting innocence. Too many invitations had been accepted too quickly. Too many guests had heard that Miss Constance Norcombe had quarrelled with her family over music, now listed under Sir Barnaby's arranging name. By the time Constance arrived from Denby House with Felicity, Lord Denby, and his widowed aunt, the room already held patrons, musicians, curious relations, and several ladies who had never before attended a rehearsal in their lives. Theodore stood near the rear of the room with his solicitor. He did not approach at once. Constance was grateful for that. The blue-bound notebook rested beneath her arm. The silver tuning fork remained inside her reticule. Both objects had left Norcombe House with her the day before and had not left her possession since. Across the polished floor, Sir Barnaby spoke with the conductor as though he had composed every note awaiting rehearsal. Lady Miriam stood beside him in dark green silk, receiving sympathetic glances from women who had already decided Constance's departure from home proved instability rather than courage. "You needn't stay through the entire program," Felicity whispered. Constance looked toward the musicians taking their seats. "I came to hear what they stole." "I'm sorry." "I know." The answer was not forgiveness, but it was not rejection. Felicity understood the difference and fell silent. The conductor lifted his baton. Conversation faded. The opening bars of Summer's Lanterns entered softly through the strings. Constance knew each phrase before it arrived. She had written the first melody after watching lamps appear one by one beyond a garden terrace, their small lights answering the first stars. In her hands, the music had carried restraint, anticipation, and the quiet warmth of people gathering before evening deepened. Under the printed arrangement, the opening remained recognizable, though several inner lines had been thickened clumsily. Sir Barnaby had allowed someone to make the piece louder. He had not made it truer. Constance stood without moving while the first passage unfolded. Some guests watched the musicians, more watched her. Lady Miriam looked in her direction only once, wearing the expression of a woman waiting for a child to embarrass herself. Theodore did not look away at all. The orchestra approached the bridge. Constance felt the coming error like a misstep on a familiar staircase. The fair copy stolen from her portfolio had ended before she completed the passage. Whoever had prepared the rehearsal version possessed the opening, the principal dance figure, and the beginning of the bridge. They did not possess its resolution. The violas entered too heavily. The second violin answered in the wrong register. Then the entire passage turned toward a crude dominant chord that forced the melody forward without earning its return. Constance's hands grew cold. It was not merely incorrect. It betrayed the purpose of the piece. The music had been written to gather light, not seize it. The conductor lowered the baton after the final cadence. A few guests applauded politely. Sir Barnaby smiled. "A spirited arrangement," one gentleman said. "Very fashionable." Constance heard herself speak before caution could turn into surrender. "It is unfinished." The words carried across the room. The conductor glanced toward Sir Barnaby. Lady Miriam's fan opened with a snap. "Constance," she said, "this is not the place. It is exactly the place. The work is being rehearsed here." Sir Barnaby stepped forward. "The arrangement is complete." "The bridge is false." A murmur moved through the guests. One of the musicians looked down at his copy as if the notes might defend themselves. Lady Miriam gave a soft, sorrowful laugh. "My stepdaughter has been under considerable strain. She mistakes familiarity with a household piece for authorship." Constance felt the insult settle over the room. Jealous, unstable, overwrought. The words did not need to be spoken when everyone understood the pattern. Sir Barnaby folded his hands behind his back. "She copied portions under my guidance. That appears to have confused her." Theodore moved then, but only far enough to place himself where Constance could see him. He did not interrupt. He waited. Constance turned toward the conductor. "May I use the pianoforte?" The man looked again at Sir Barnaby. Theodore's voice entered the silence. "She asked you." The conductor flushed. "Yes, Miss Norcombe." Constance crossed the floor. Every step carried her farther from the woman who had been told to stand quietly at the edge of rooms. She set the blue notebook on the music stand, but did not open it. The missing bridge was not something she needed to read. It lived in the memory of her fingers. She sat, placed both hands upon the keys, and played the opening phrase exactly as the orchestra had done. Then she entered the bridge. She allowed the inner voice to rise beneath the melody, not as ornament, but as answer. The left hand softened. The upper line delayed itself by one breath. When the harmony turned, it did not force the music home. It invited it. The final phrase returned with the warmth the crude arrangement had lost. Constance lifted her hands. No one applauded. The silence was too attentive for that. The first violinist looked toward the conductor. That resolves the second phrase. The conductor nodded slowly and prepares the return properly. Sir Barnaby's face reddened. Any competent musician could invent an alternative. Then explain why mine completes the thematic pattern begun in the opening, Constance said. Explain why your printed version abandons it. He stared at her. I am not here to be examined by my daughter. No, you are here to be credited for her work. Lady Miriam stepped closer to the pianoforte. You have made your point. Leave before you do further harm to yourself. Constance looked up at her. You are the one who removed the folio from my room. That is Felicity's confusion. Felicity rose. Her face was pale, but her voice carried. It isn't. Lady Miriam went still. Felicity clasped her hands before her and continued. I saw you leave Constance's room with the music beneath your shawl. You told me it was needed for wedding arrangements. Sir Barnaby turned toward her. You will stop this at once. Matthew Denby moved to his wife's side. She'll speak if she chooses. His tone was quiet, but no one mistook it for uncertainty. Lady Miriam looked from Felicity to Constance. A bride exhausted by ceremony is hardly a reliable witness. I know what I saw, Felicity said, and I know I should have spoken sooner. The room shifted, not fully. Some faces softened toward Constance. Others tightened with discomfort, offended less by theft than by a daughter accusing her parents before witnesses. Sir Barnaby seized that division. This has become a vulgar family quarrel. My elder daughter resents her sister's marriage and has chosen music as the instrument of revenge. Constance rose from the pianoforte. If revenge were my purpose, I would stay and let you turn this into spectacle. She closed the notebook and lifted it into her arms. I have proved that the submitted copy was incomplete. I have named the missing passage. The musicians themselves heard it resolve the work. I will not remain while you invite strangers to judge whether I have suffered attractively enough to deserve belief. The words cut through the room more cleanly than anger would have done. Theodore stepped toward her, then stopped at the proper distance. Do you wish me to accompany you? Constance looked at him. 3 years earlier, he had left without asking what she wanted. Now he stood before a room full of witnesses and asked. Yes, she said, but not before I leave. He inclined his head. Behind you, then. Constance walked toward the doors. Felicity followed with Matthew. Lord Denby's aunt gathered her shawl and came after them. Theodore remained 1 pace behind Constance, close enough to protect her from interruption, and far enough not to claim her exit as his decision. No one tried to stop them. In the entrance hall, the noise of the rehearsal room returned in fragments behind the closing doors. Constance's hands began to tremble, only when the room could no longer see them. Theodore noticed, but he did not touch her. You were magnificent, he said. She shook her head. I was necessary. You were both. A footman opened the outer door. The evening air entered cool against her face. Constance held the notebook tighter. They will say I staged it. Some will. They will say Felicity lied for me. Some will. They will say you confirmed my story because of what once passed between us. Theodore's expression hardened, though not toward her. Then proof must be stronger than their comfort. Constance looked back once at the closed doors. The bridge is not enough. No, we need the publisher's records, the original proof, and whoever prepared the rehearsal copy. Theodore nodded. I will arrange it. She turned toward him. He corrected himself at once. You will decide what is arranged. I will make access possible. The distinction mattered. Constance accepted it with a small breath. Behind them, through the doors, the musicians began Summer Lanterns again. This time, before the false bridge arrived, the conductor stopped them. By noon the following day, Theodore had secured the publisher's agreement to suspend further printing, acquire every unsold copy, and transfer the engraved plates into his solicitor's custody. He told himself the arrangement was temporary. He told himself Constance would be spared another public spectacle, that no drawing room could mock what no shop could sell, and that Summer Lanterns would be safe until the evidence was complete. The explanations sounded reasonable in the publisher's office. They sounded almost honorable. That should have warned him. The proprietor sat behind the same crowded desk where Sir Barnaby's contract had been opened 2 days earlier. Theodore's solicitor reviewed the proposed terms, while rain darkened the strand beyond the windows. The existing attribution cannot simply be erased, the publisher said. A corrected edition would require Miss Norcombe's authorization, especially if her name is to replace Sir Barnaby's. There will be no corrected edition yet, Theodore replied. The plates will be withdrawn and destroyed. The question made him pause. He imagined the false title hammered flat, Sir Barnaby's claim rendered useless, every printed copy gathered into locked crates. The image brought satisfaction too quickly. Held, he said, until the matter is resolved. The publisher looked uneasy. Miss Norcombe may wish the work issued properly. She has endured enough public attention. Theodore heard the certainty in his own voice and mistook it for care. I will not have her forced to defend herself before every subscriber in London. His solicitor lowered his pen. Your Grace, has Miss Norcombe instructed us to pursue this purchase? Theodore looked at him. No. Then I must advise that acquiring the plates without her consent may complicate her claim. I am not purchasing her claim. You are purchasing control of the object, over which she claims authorship. The words irritated him because they were precise. Theodore rose and crossed to the rain-streaked window. He had spent the night remembering the tremor in Constance's hands outside Hanover Square rooms. She had stood alone at the pianoforte while her parents called her unstable. She had played the missing bridge before people who considered female pain acceptable only when it remained graceful. He could prevent a repetition. He possessed the rank, money, and influence to close the door before society entered again. Prepare the agreement, he said, but do not destroy anything. The publisher did not move. I must notify Miss Norcombe. Her authorization is needed if there is to be any correction in the trade record. Theodore turned from the window. You may tell her the publication has been suspended. The solicitor's expression changed, not disobedience, disappointment. Theodore recognized it and ignored it. 2 hours later, Constance received the publisher's note at Denby House. She read it in the smaller drawing room where her blue-bound notebook lay open beside the pianoforte, and the silver tuning fork rested within reach. Felicity sat near the fire, with an unanswered letter from Lady Miriam folded in her lap. Matthew had gone to his club to address the rumors spreading through Mayfair, though no amount of masculine indignation could retrieve a story once society found pleasure in it. Constance read the publisher's careful phrase and twice. His Grace had negotiated acquisition of the plates. Unsold copies would be withdrawn. Further printing would cease. Any corrected attribution awaited Miss Norcombe's consent. Theodore had acted before asking. Again. "Send a note to Ketteridge House," Constance told the footman. "Ask His Grace to call at once. Lady Denby will remain with us." Felicity looked up. "What has he done?" Constance handed her the publisher's note. Felicity's eyes moved quickly over the page. "Perhaps he meant to protect you." "He did." Constance closed the notebook. "That is the difficulty." Theodore arrived within the hour. Rain marked the shoulders of his coat, and his expression suggested he already knew why he had been summoned. He bowed to Felicity, then to Constance. "She did not invite him to sit. You purchased the plates. The agreement is not yet complete. You ordered it prepared." "Yes," without speaking to me. His gaze held hers. "Yes." Felicity remained near the fireplace, present but silent. Theodore took one step into the room and stopped. "After last night, I believed withdrawal was the safest course." "For whom?" "For you. You believed that." "I did. And therefore you did not ask." He absorbed the accusation without defense. But Constance had learned that remorse could arrive too late to prevent harm. "The rehearsal proved the submitted work was incomplete," she said. "The publisher's records prove my father claimed ownership. The proof sheet proves I was deceived. Those plates are not merely instruments of humiliation. They are part of the truth. They would have been preserved, under your control, under my solicitor's custody, because you decided that was best." Theodore's jaw tightened. "I watched them turn your work against you. And so you decided what should happen to it. I wanted to stop them from using it again. You cannot restore my voice by purchasing the right to silence it." The room went still. Theodore looked toward the open notebook, then at the tuning fork beside it. Understanding reached him slowly, and because it did, Constance knew the wound had found its proper depth. 3 years ago, she continued, you allowed men to tell you what my corrections meant. Now you are deciding what should become of the music itself. The intention is kinder, the action is the same. You are right, no hesitation, no appeal to rank, yet the admission did not ease her anger. Cancel the purchase, I will. Today, the publisher will communicate with me directly. Yes, your solicitor will share nothing with you that has not been shared with me at the same time. Agreed. Theodore looked as though he wished to come closer, but he remained where he was. Constance, I am sorry. I believe you. Hope moved across his face before she finished. But belief in your regret does not restore my trust. The hope vanished. He accepted that too. What do you require of me? No private meetings for now. No offers of compensation. No patronage. No proposal made from guilt or a desire to repair my reputation with your name. I had not intended to propose today, but you have considered it. He did not lie. Yes, then consider this instead. I will not become Duchess of Ketteridge to make society forget that Miss Norcombe was robbed. Theodore lowered his head for one brief moment. Understood. I will decide whether the music is hidden, corrected, published, or performed. Not my father, not the publisher, not you. It is yours. Then act as though it is. He looked at her fully. "I will cancel the purchase before the hour is out." "Thank you." The formal words placed distance between them more effectively than anger. Theodore bowed to Felicity, then to Constance. At the door, he stopped. "For what it is worth, I did not wish to erase your name. I know." Her voice softened despite herself. "You wished to erase the danger. You did not understand that the danger and my voice had been placed on the same page." He left without asking forgiveness. The footman had barely closed the door when Felicity unfolded Lady Miriam's letter. "There is more." Constance turned. Felicity handed it over. Lady Miriam's message was not long. She demanded that Felicity sign the family declaration before the next morning and state publicly that Constance had become fixated upon Theodore's return. If she refused, Lady Miriam would tell society that the Duke was buying the music because Constance had trapped him through scandal, and that Felicity had betrayed her parents to secure favor with her husband's rank. Constance finished reading and laid the letter beside the publisher's note. Two versions of the same control, one wrapped in protection, the other in threat. "What will you do?" she asked. Felicity looked frightened, but she did not look away. "I don't know yet." Constance placed a hand over the unsigned letter. "Then this time, no one will answer for you." Theodore cancelled the purchase before sunset. The publisher's clerk brought written confirmation to Denby House, along with a second note stating that no plate, manuscript, or unsold copy would be moved without Constance's instruction. She read both documents in the morning room while Felicity sat near the window. Lady Miriam's ultimatum still folded beside her. Theodore had done exactly what she required. That did not erase the mistake. It did, however, prove that apology had reached his conduct. "What will you do now?" Felicity asked. Constance looked toward the pianoforte. The blue-bound notebook rested on the closed lid. The silver tuning fork lay beside it, catching a narrow line of morning light. "I will not ask them to hide the music." Felicity's expression tightened. "Then Mama will say you want attention. She will say that whatever I choose." Constance crossed to the instrument and opened the notebook. The first pages held the old Ketteridge variations. Later pages carried the unfinished shape of summer lanterns. Between them lay 3 years of silence, work, and anger no one else had earned the right to interpret. If the false version disappears, my father will call the matter settled. The story will remain that he arranged it, and I became emotional over credit. Then how can you prove otherwise? By making the difference audible. Felicity studied her. A public performance. A controlled one. Not a family spectacle. A subscription audience with the publisher, musicians, witnesses, and the records present. You would play before them? I would show them what was taken. Felicity looked down at the letter in her lap. I don't know whether I can do what you did. You do not have to do it as I did. Constance's voice softened, but you must decide whether fear will write your answer. Felicity's fingers closed around the paper. She did not respond. Yet she did not ask Constance to protect her from the choice. That was something. By noon, Constance had sent requests to the publisher and Theodore's solicitor. She did not ask Theodore to call. The boundary she had set remained in force. Instead, she instructed the solicitor to attend a meeting at the publisher's premises and required all correspondence to be copied to her. Lord Denby's widowed aunt accompanied her. Felicity came as well, pale but composed. Theodore was already waiting in the publisher's office when they arrived, standing near the wall rather than the desk. He bowed. Miss Norcombe. Your Grace. No one remarked upon the formality. The publisher had laid out certified copies of Sir Barnaby's contract and payment entry. The originals remained secured in the business archive, exactly where they belonged. A written receipt waited beside a blank transfer form for the annotated proof sheet, though that original still remained locked at Ketteridge House. Constance placed her blue notebook on the desk, but kept one hand upon it. "I propose a corrected subscription performance," she said. The publisher stared. A performance of both works. A demonstration. 3 parts. She turned the notebook so the others could see the first page without surrendering possession. First, the original Ketteridge family theme as His Grace gave it to me. Second, the published arrangement bearing Sir Barnaby's name. Third, my complete intended variations, including the correction ignored on the proof sheet. The solicitor leaned closer. And Summer Lanterns, the same principle, the incomplete submitted version, followed by the finished bridge and complete form. The publisher looked uncertain. "You mean to ask an audience to judge authorship by hearing the compositions compared, not by hearing alone. The notebook establishes development. The annotated proof establishes that I corrected the work under deception. Your contract establishes who claimed ownership. Your ledger establishes who received payment. The missing bridge establishes that the submitted manuscript left my possession before the work was complete." Theodore's gaze remained on her, intent and quiet. "What audience?" the publisher asked. "Subscribers, selected patrons, musicians, and those who attended the rehearsal. No newspapers invited by my family. No public handbills. No room in which gossip outruns the music. Hanover Square rooms would serve," Theodore said. Constance looked at him. "Only if the booking is made in the publisher's name, not yours." "Agreed. And the program will name neither me nor Sir Barnaby as composer until the demonstration begins." "Agreed." The publisher cleared his throat. A corrected attribution would still require formal authorization. "You will have mine after the evidence is heard." Constance paused. "Not before." The man nodded slowly. "Then I will prepare the room." The solicitor turned to Theodore. "Your Grace, the agreement to purchase the plates has been cancelled. The publisher has acknowledged that no control passed to you." Theodore looked at Constance. "You have the written confirmation?" "I do. Good." The word held relief, not because she had thanked him, but because he had corrected the act. Constance closed the notebook. "There is one other matter. The annotated proof sheet must leave Ketteridge House before the performance." Theodore inclined his head. "It will be transferred to the solicitor under written receipt, with you present if you wish." "I do. Then you shall be." He did not add that he would arrange everything. He had begun to understand that language could betray a habit before action did. The publisher left to consult the room manager, and the solicitor moved to the outer office with him. The chaperone and Felicity remained near the window, speaking quietly enough to provide propriety without pretending not to see. Constance stood beside the desk. Theodore stayed where he was. "You asked me to cancel the purchase," he said. "I did. It is cancelled. I know. I also instructed my solicitor that no information is to reach me before it reaches you. I received the same copies this morning." He drew a breath. "Then I owe you an apology that is not hidden inside obedience." Constance said nothing. Theodore continued. "I treated your reputation as something I could manage. I saw the attack at Hanover Square and decided the answer was to remove the instrument of attack. I did not ask whether the same object was also the means by which you intended to speak. His voice remained controlled, but the control no longer felt like distance. I converted fear into authority. I did it 3 years ago, and I nearly did it again. Nearly. I ordered the agreement prepared. The fact that I stopped before completion does not make the choice harmless. He met her eyes. I am sorry. I do not ask you to forgive me. The specificity of it reached deeper than a grand declaration would have done. Constance believed him. She also understood that belief and trust were not the same gift. I accept that you mean it, she said. That is all I can offer today. It is more than I expected. Do not make gratitude another way of asking for more. I won't. The contraction sounded natural in the quiet room, stripped of title and performance. Constance looked down at the notebook. There is something I need to know before this goes further. Theodore waited. When the room hears that you gave me the Ketteridge melody, society may say I exceeded propriety. They may say you were careless with a family confidence. They may say the work should never have been mine to transform. It was yours the moment I placed it in your hands. That is not what I asked. He understood. His expression changed, not with fear, but with decision. Yes, I will say it before everyone. I gave you the theme because I trusted your mind with it. You transformed it because you had the right to create from what was freely shared. Even if your family objects, even if every Ketteridge portrait falls from the wall in protest. A small, unwilling smile touched her mouth. Theodore saw it and did not press closer. Then we proceed, she said. On your terms, he answered. On the truth's terms. The publisher returned carrying a bundle of old work slips. There may be one more source, he said. The senior copyist who prepared Summer Lanterns kept his rehearsal sheet. He refuses to surrender original work without written assurance. Constance straightened. Where is he? Still in London. The publisher held up the note, and according to this, he remembers who told him to remove Miss Norcombe's name. The senior copyist worked above a narrow stationer's shop near Covent Garden, where the air carried the scents of paper dust, glue, and rain-damp wool. Constance arrived with Lord Denby's widowed aunt, Felicity, and the solicitor shortly after 11. Theodore came separately and remained in the outer room until Constance had been received. The boundary she had set still stood. No private meetings. No assumption that his presence gave him authority over the inquiry. The copyist was a spare, grey-haired man named Mr. Bell, with ink permanently settled into the ridges of his fingers. He bowed to the ladies, then looked anxiously toward the solicitor. I kept the sheet because the arrangement troubled me, he said, not the music itself. The instruction. Constance placed her blue-bound notebook on the table before her, but did not open it. The silver tuning fork remained inside her reticule. What instruction? Mr. Bell crossed to a locked drawer and removed a folded rehearsal sheet protected between two boards. He did not hand it directly to anyone. Instead, he placed it on the table and waited while the solicitor prepared a receipt. This is the original working copy for Summer Lanterns, he said. The publisher sent me the incomplete fair copy. Lady Miriam Norcombe delivered the final direction herself. Felicity went still beside Constance. Mr. Bell opened the sheet. The music was familiar at once. Constance recognized the stolen passages, the unfinished bridge, and the crude replacement inserted where her fair copy had ended. Along the upper margin, in Lady Miriam's controlled hand, stood a sentence written in dark brown ink. Miss N's name is not to appear on any copy. For a moment, Constance heard nothing, not the traffic below, not the faint rasp of Mr. Bell's sleeve against the table. not even Felicity's breath. The words were plain. That made them crueler. Lady Miriam had not forgotten her name. She had ordered its removal. "Did you know who Miss N was?" Constance asked. "I assumed a daughter or relation within the household." Mr. Bell's discomfort deepened. Sir Barnaby's name was supplied as a ranger. Lady Miriam said the family wished to avoid confusion. "Did you ask why the composer's name was being omitted?" "No, Miss Norcombe." He did not attempt to excuse himself. "I believed the instruction reflected a family agreement." "I see now that I should have asked." The solicitor leaned over the sheet without touching it. "Did Lady Miriam deliver the first manuscript as well?" "Yes, 3 years ago. She brought the Ketteridge quadrille and later returned the corrected proof. I prepared some of the copy for the engraver." Constance looked at the marginal note again. "And Sir Barnaby received the payment." "The publisher's ledger confirms it," the solicitor said. "The certified extract is already in my custody." Felicity pressed one hand against the edge of the table. Mamma knew. Her voice was scarcely above a whisper. Constance turned toward her. Yes, she knew exactly what she was doing. Yes. Felicity closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, fear remained, but something harder stood beside it. "I saw her take the folio from your room." "I knew she had lied when she said it was for wedding arrangements." "I didn't know about the contract or the money, but I knew enough to ask." Constance said nothing. Felicity's face tightened. "I didn't ask because my settlements were still being discussed. Mama had already warned me that any scandal could make Matthew's family reconsider. I told myself the music would only be played privately. I told myself you would forgive me because you always did." The admission entered the room without disguise. Constance felt the old instinct to relieve her sister's guilt, but she did not obey it. "You were afraid." "Yes, and your fear helped them." Felicity flinched. "Yes. I cannot forgive that because you finally said it aloud." "I know." Felicity's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "I will give a statement." Mr. Bell glanced toward the solicitor. "A witnessed one." "Yes," Felicity said. "In my own words." Constance looked at her sister for a long moment. "Then write only what you saw and what you knew at the time. Do not make yourself smaller. Do not make yourself braver." Felicity nodded. The solicitor completed the receipt. Mr. Bell signed the transfer, then placed the original rehearsal sheet into a protective folder. It passed from his possession to the solicitor's custody in full view of everyone present. The movement was recorded, witnessed, and dated. Constance watched until the folder disappeared into the solicitor's locked case. One original, one route. No room for later confusion. They returned to Denby House before 3. Felicity gave her statement in the smaller library, with Lord Denby's widowed aunt and the solicitor present. She wrote that she had seen Lady Miriam leave Constance's room, carrying a music folio beneath her shawl. She recorded the date as nearly as she could remember, and stated that Lady Miriam had called it wedding material. She added that she had remained silent because her marriage settlements were under discussion. When she finished, she signed. The statement was witnessed, sealed, and placed in the solicitor's custody beside the rehearsal sheet. Only then did Constance ask Theodore to enter. He had waited in the outer drawing room for almost an hour. When he came into the library, he did not look impatient. He bowed to Felicity, to the chaperone, and finally to Constance. "The copyist confirmed it," Constance said. "Lady Miriam wrote that my name was not to appear on any copy." Theodore's face hardened, and the sheet transferred to the solicitor under receipt. "Good." He glanced toward Felicity. "Your statement?" Signed, she said. Theodore inclined his head. That required courage. Felicity looked at Constance. It required less courage than silence cost her. No one answered. The truth was complete enough. Felicity left with the chaperone after the solicitor gathered his case. The library door remained open to the corridor. Servants moved somewhere beyond it, near enough to preserve propriety. Theodore stayed by the hearth. Constance stood beside the table where the statement had been signed. "There is something I have not said," he began. "Then say it. When you perform the Ketteridge theme, I will have to acknowledge that I gave it to you before there was any formal understanding between us." Constance studied him. "You knew that. I knew it as fact. I had not fully considered the consequence." His gaze shifted toward the open doorway, as though society already waited beyond it. "My family will call it indiscreet. Some will say I allowed private affection to weaken judgment. Others will claim you took advantage of a confidence that should never have been shared. Will that alter what you say?" "No." The answer came at once, but I wanted you to know that I understand the cost now. And Theodore's expression changed. The old control remained, but it no longer concealed him, and I am ashamed that I once valued Ketteridge dignity more than your truth. If my acknowledgement diminishes me in the eyes of society, then society will finally see the proper proportion of the matter. Constance felt the steadiness she had carried all day begin to fracture, not because he offered sacrifice, because he had ceased calling honesty a sacrifice at all. Theodore took no step toward her. "I will stand where you place me," he said. "I will say the melody was freely given. I will say the variations are yours. I will say I failed you because I trusted authority more than character." His voice lowered. "And I will accept whatever follows." Constance looked down at her hands. They had remained composed while her mother's instruction was read, while Felicity confessed, while the evidence changed custody. Now they trembled. Theodore saw and did nothing without permission. That restraint undid her. She crossed the space between them. His eyes widened, but he did not reach for her. Constance placed her arms around him first. For one suspended heartbeat, Theodore remained still. Then, only when she held him more firmly, his arms closed around her with careful strength. He did not press her closer than she came. He did not mistake grief for surrender. Constance rested her forehead against his shoulder and let the silence hold what neither of them could yet say. When she drew back, he released her at once. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Do not thank me as though I have promised forgiveness. I won't." She looked at him. "But you may understand that this was not nothing." His breath caught. "I understand." On the table beside them, the place where Felicity's statement had rested was empty. The evidence had gone safely into the solicitor's case. The truth had left the room in proper custody. What remained between Constance and Theodore was not proof, not obligation, and not yet reconciliation. It was trust returning by a single measure, no faster than she chose. Lady Miriam's ultimatum arrived before the ink on Felicity's statement had fully dried. The note was delivered to Denby House in a sealed cover marked private, though nothing in its contents respected privacy. Felicity read it, standing beside the breakfast room window, her face losing color line by line. If she did not withdraw her statement before the subscription concert, Lady Miriam would announce that her younger daughter had betrayed her parents to secure favor with a baron's household. Sir Barnaby would add that Constance had manufactured the dispute to recover the Duke's attention and force a marriage. "They mean to make you choose between us," Constance said. Felicity folded the letter carefully, as though precision could contain the threat. They already have. Matthew Denby stood near the mantel. His expression was controlled, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. "Your marriage will survive truth," he said to his wife. "It will not survive a lifetime built on fear." Felicity looked at him. "You may regret saying that when the gossip begins. Then I will regret it honestly." He held out his hand. After a brief hesitation, she placed the letter in it. "What do you want done?" Constance asked. Felicity's eyes moved toward her. "I want my statement to stand." "Then it stands. Mama will say I chose your grievance over my family. You chose what you witnessed." Felicity breathed in slowly. "I should have chosen it sooner." Yes, Constance did not soften the truth. She also did not turn it into punishment. But sooner is no longer available. Now is. By afternoon, the final invitations had been dispatched. The publisher had reserved Hanover Square rooms in his own name. The audience would include subscribers, selected patrons, musicians, the publisher, the senior copyist, the solicitor, Lord and Lady Denby, and those social witnesses whose opinions had helped spread the old story. No public handbills were issued. No newspapers were invited. Constance refused to let scandal outrun evidence again. Sir Barnaby sent word that he intended to attend. Lady Miriam sent no reply at all. The silence was more threatening than refusal. 3 days before the concert, Constance entered Hanover Square rooms for the final rehearsal, with the blue-bound notebook under her arm and the silver tuning fork secured inside its case. The annotated proof sheet had been transferred that morning from Ketteridge House to the solicitor under written receipt. With Constance present, it now rested in the solicitor's locked portfolio beside certified copies of Sir Barnaby's contract and payment entry, the original rehearsal sheet from Mr. Bell, and Felicity's sealed statement. No object had moved without witness. No truth would depend upon memory alone. Theodore waited near the musician's platform. He had not approached Constance privately since their embrace in the library. He had honored the boundary she set, even after that boundary had softened. When she entered, he bowed. "Miss Norcombe, Your Grace." The conductor called the musicians to order. Constance set her notebook on the pianoforte and struck the silver tuning fork lightly against the wooden edge. The clear note rose into the empty room. She held it near her ear, then found the pitch on the instrument. Theodore watched without speaking. "We begin with the family theme," she told the musicians. "Only 8 measures, no ornament." The melody sounded spare and dignified. It carried the restraint of old houses, old duties, and old griefs, carefully polished until they resembled pride. Constance played it once alone. Then the orchestra repeated it. She turned the page. Now the published version. The musicians entered the Ketteridge quadrille as society knew it, brightened for fashion and weighed down by the heavy cadence she had tried to correct 3 years earlier. The difference was audible even without explanation. The original theme had dignity. The published arrangement displayed it. When they finished, Constance looked toward Theodore. "They will say the melody belonged to your family." "It did." "They will say I had no right to change it." "You did. Because you gave it to me. Because I gave it freely, and because creation is not theft when trust is offered without condition." His answer reached every musician in the room. Constance held his gaze. "Will you say that before Sir Barnaby?" "Yes." "Before Lady Miriam?" "Yes." "Before anyone who claims your confidence was compromised by affection?" Theodore's face tightened, but he did not hesitate. "Yes." Constance nodded once. Then we continue. She turned to Summer Lanterns. The musicians played the incomplete version first. The false bridge arrived exactly as it had during the invitation rehearsal. Loud where it should have been tender, hurried where it should have waited. Constance stopped them before the final cadence. Then she struck the tuning fork again and began the completed version. This time, the inner line rose beneath the melody, like light gathering behind windows. The bridge opened instead of forcing its return. The violins answered one another. The viola softened. The final phrase came home without losing wonder. When the last note faded, no one moved. Theodore stood at the edge of the platform with an expression Constance had not seen before. Not regret, not admiration, recognition without fear. "I had never heard it complete," he said. "No. It sounds like hope choosing to remain." The words unsettled her because they were true. She closed the notebook. Tomorrow, the room must hear the distinction before it sees the documents. "Why?" the conductor asked. "Because paper can be dismissed as business. Music cannot be argued out of the ear once it has been understood." The publisher nodded slowly. "Then the proof follows the performance." "Exactly." The musicians withdrew for refreshment, leaving the room quieter. The chaperone remained near the doors, speaking with Felicity and Matthew. Theodore approached only after Constance looked toward him. "Where do you want me during the presentation?" he asked. "At my right when I speak. And when you play, behind me. Not beside you. The music must not look as though it requires ducal protection." He absorbed that without offense. "Behind you, then, and you will speak only after I finish." "Agreed." Constance studied him. "You have accepted every instruction today. I am learning that love is not proved by how quickly I act." The word entered the room quietly. Love, not yet a declaration, not yet a claim. Theodore looked toward the empty chairs. "I loved your mind before I understood how frightened I was of needing it. You saw what others missed. You asked what others were too polite or too timid to ask. I admired that until your judgment had the power to wound me. Then I mistook fear for caution." Constance felt the old ache shift, and now I would rather be wounded by your truth than protected by another lie. She looked down at her hand resting on the closed notebook. "Do not say more today." "I won't. This room is for judgment, not proposal." She glanced up sharply. Theodore's expression held the faintest trace of rueful warmth. "You told me not to make one here." I listened. Constance extended her hand across the narrow space between them. He looked at it, then at her face, waiting even now. "You may," she said. Theodore took her hand. His fingers closed gently around hers. They stood in silence for one full measure, then another. No audience watched. No family demanded a performance. The touch carried no bargain, only trust returned in the exact amount she chose to give. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will stand where you place me." Constance tightened her hand once before releasing him. "Tomorrow, Theodore, we will see whether the room can bear the truth." At the far end of Hanover Square rooms, the musicians returned to their chairs. Constance opened the tuning fork's case. The silver instrument lay ready beside the corrected score. She lifted it, struck the first clear note, and the final rehearsal began. The first note silenced the room more completely than any command could have done. Constance stood at the pianoforte in Hanover Square rooms, with the silver tuning fork still raised near her ear, its clear pitch fading beneath the gilded ceiling. Every invited witness faced her. Subscribers filled the front rows. Musicians waited behind their stands. The publisher sat beside Theodore's solicitor, whose locked portfolio rested at his feet. Sir Barnaby occupied an aisle seat with Lady Miriam beside him, both rigid with the confidence of people who had spent years believing authority could outlast evidence. Felicity sat with Matthew near the front. Theodore stood where Constance had placed him, at her right, while she spoke, and one step behind her when she turned to the instrument. Constance lowered the tuning fork. "You have been invited to hear 3 versions of one history," she said. "The first is the melody His Grace entrusted to me in 1816. The second is the commercial arrangement printed under Sir Barnaby Norcombe's name. The third is the work as I composed it." No one moved. Constance played the original Ketteridge theme alone. 8 spare measures crossed the room with restrained dignity. When she lifted her hands, the musicians entered with the published quadrille. The melody remained recognizable, but its grace had been crowded by fashionable ornament. The ignored correction made the cadence descend too heavily. Several listeners shifted. As the difference became audible, then Constance opened her blue-bound notebook, which had never left her possession, and played the complete variations from the dated sketches within it. The old theme opened beneath her hands. Light entered its formal phrases. The second variation delayed its answer by 1 tender measure. The corrected cadence rose, breathed, and resolved without weight. By the final chord, the room had heard continuity no forged title could conceal. Constance turned. "Your Grace, did you give me the original melody?" Theodore stepped to her right. "I did. Did you give it with instructions that I was forbidden to alter it?" "No, I gave it freely because I trusted your judgment." "Had you heard any portion of my variations before they were published?" "Yes, I heard the unfinished second variation in 1816, before the publisher received the manuscript." "Did you authorize Sir Barnaby to claim authorship?" "I did not." Sir Barnaby rose. "This proves nothing beyond private familiarity. I arranged the work into a form suitable for publication." Constance looked at him. "Then we shall examine what was published." The solicitor opened his portfolio. Under written receipt, he removed the original annotated proof sheet that had been transferred from Ketteridge House in Constance's presence. He placed it beneath a protective cover on the evidence table. The publisher stood. "This is the proof sent to His Grace in 1816. The corrections are in Miss Norcombe's hand. The printer's routing mark matches my house records." Constance indicated the ignored cadence. "That correction was never carried into the final commercial plate. If I had authorized publication, why was the final proof never returned to me?" The publisher faced the audience. It was returned by Lady Miriam Norcombe, who stated that the family had settled the matter. "We dealt with Sir Barnaby as proprietor. We did not obtain Miss Norcombe's signature. He produced certified copies of the contract and payment entry, while the originals remained secured in his business archive. Sir Barnaby signed as arranger and authorized proprietor. Payment was made to him. Lady Miriam's fan remained closed in her lap. A wife may deliver household papers without understanding every business detail." "Then perhaps Mr. Bell can clarify what you understood," Constance said. The senior copyist came forward. The solicitor removed the original Summer Lanterns rehearsal sheet from the portfolio and displayed the margin without surrendering custody. Mr. Bell identified his working copy and the handwriting beside the upper stave. "Miss N's name is not to appear on any copy," he read. His voice shook, but the words did not. Lady Miriam delivered that instruction herself. She also delivered the earlier manuscript and returned the corrected proof. I believed I was obeying a legitimate family arrangement. I should have asked whose name was being removed. Lady Miriam rose slowly. I protected my daughters from vulgar ambition. Her gaze swept toward Constance. An unmarried woman publishing music under her own name invites scrutiny no respectable family should welcome. You welcomed the money, Constance said. You welcomed the invitations. You welcomed the Duke's name on the title. I protected the family name. Constance's voice did not rise. You protected the family name by erasing mine. The sentence held the room. Lady Miriam's expression hardened, but no answer came. Sir Barnaby stepped into the silence. I improved both works. Whatever their origin, the published forms required masculine judgment and professional arrangement. Constance turned to the musicians. Play the submitted version of Summer Lanterns. The incomplete composition began. Its opening carried her melody. Its false bridge arrived bluntly, forcing the harmony toward a crude return. The conductor stopped at her signal. Constance faced Sir Barnaby. Explain the missing bridge. A bridge is a matter of taste. Then describe the thematic answer prepared by the opening phrase. I will not submit to examination by my daughter. You claimed the right to be credited for her work. Explanation is the smallest burden that claim requires. Sir Barnaby glanced toward the score, then toward the publisher. He had no answer. Constance returned to the pianoforte and played the completed passage from memory. The inner voice rose beneath the melody, turning the harmony gently home. Several musicians nodded before the final chord faded. I heard that bridge weeks before the manuscript reached the publisher, Theodore said. Miss Norcombe played it at Lady Merrow's musicale in July. Felicity stood next. The solicitor opened her sealed statement, but she spoke before he could read it. I saw Lady Miriam leave Constance's room, carrying a music folio beneath her shawl. She told me it was required for wedding arrangements. I remained silent because my marriage settlements were being discussed. I did not know about Sir Barnaby's contract or payment then, but I knew the folio belonged to Constance. My silence helped them. Lady Miriam stared at her. You betray your mother before strangers. Matthew rose beside his wife. She tells the truth before witnesses. Our marriage will not purchase comfort with another woman's name. He turned to Sir Barnaby. Denby's support for your claims ends today. The publisher came forward with a prepared declaration. My house withdraws the attribution B. Norcombe from both works. Any corrected edition will identify Miss Constance Norcombe as composer. Future proceeds will be paid to her. Certified notices will be sent to subscribers and music sellers. The solicitor added that civil recovery of past profits and damages would begin immediately. No one spoke of prison or instant judgment. The records would move through proper channels, but the false credit had ended in the room where it was challenged. Lady Miriam's face had gone white. Theodore addressed her with ducal formality. Until you acknowledge Miss Norcombe's authorship and the harm done to her, you will not be received at Ketteridge House. Matthew's voice followed. Nor at Denby House. Sir Barnaby offered his arm to his wife. She did not take it. They left separately, surrounded not by outrage, but by the colder punishment of society, refusing to look away. Constance waited until the doors closed. Only then did Theodore step forward. He faced the witnesses rather than her. Miss Norcombe asked me 3 years ago why I trusted every man who profited from her work before I trusted her. I will answer fully now. I mistook her corrections for consent, because a man of rank claimed authority over them. I trusted masculine certainty because it spared me the vulnerability of asking whether I had been rejected, I withdrew without speaking to her. I allowed society to believe she had exploited my confidence. When the truth began to emerge, I tried again to control the outcome by purchasing the plates without her consent. My rank did not excuse any of it. It gave my cowardice greater power. He turned to Constance. The melody was freely given. The variations were hers. The work was hers. The harm was mine. Constance felt the room waiting for forgiveness. She gave it no performance. "You have answered," she said. "That matters." It was enough. The audience rose slowly, not in applause at first, but in recognition. Then the musicians began, followed by the publisher, the copyist, and the subscribers who had heard both the music and the truth. Constance accepted the sound without bowing her head. After the guests departed, she stood in the artist's anteroom with the door open to the corridor. Lord Denby's widowed aunt remained nearby, speaking with felicity beyond the threshold. Theodore entered only after Constance invited him. For several moments, neither spoke. "May I touch your face?" he asked. "Yes." His fingertips rested against her cheek, with such care that the tenderness hurt more than regret had. Constance leaned into his hand by choice. "I love you, Constance," he said, "not because you endured being silenced, but because you refused to remain silent." Her breath trembled. "I love you too. I could not return to the man who judged me. I can choose the man who learned to listen." Theodore's eyes closed briefly. When they opened, hope stood unguarded within them. "May I kiss you?" Constance answered by closing the distance. His mouth met hers gently. Then, with the depth of feeling both had restrained for years, there was no possession in it, no rescue, only recognition freely accepted and returned. When they parted, Theodore kept his hands where she had allowed them, one against her cheek and the other lightly holding hers. "I will not ask you to become my duchess as payment for justice," he said. "I ask for the right to court you honestly. No secrecy, no decisions made in your name, no promise beyond what you freely choose." Constance looked through the open doorway toward the empty concert room. "Then you may court me." Joy changed his face more completely than triumph ever could have done. He lifted her hand and waited before touching his lips to her knuckles. She gave the smallest nod. "And the next dance?" he asked. Constance smiled. "Only when no audience is waiting for my answer." 4 months later, Constance saw her name printed where it had always belonged. The corrected edition lay open on the table at Hanover Square Rooms beneath the winter light. Its title, engraved with restrained elegance, and the line composed by Miss Constance Norcombe placed clearly beneath it. She had insisted upon that form before the printer set the new plate. Marriage had changed her title, her household, and the shape of her future. It had not changed the name that had been stolen. The first correction had to honor the woman who had written the music before anyone thought her worth hearing. Theodore stood beside her, reading the page as though he had not already examined every proof with her permission. He wore no expression of triumph. He had learned better than to treat her restoration as his victory. "They have spelled everything correctly," he said. "A rare achievement." Constance glanced at him. "You're mocking the printer." "I'm praising him with appropriate caution." She smiled and closed the score. Outside, carriages arrived one after another along Hanover Square. The winter subscription musicale would begin within the hour. The program included Summer Lanterns, the corrected Ketteridge variations, and a new quadrille published under her married name. Every piece carried explicit authorship. No initials, no family claim, no polite disappearance. The month since the concert had not transformed justice into simplicity. Sir Barnaby had repaid part of the profits under pressure from the publisher and the solicitor. But the civil claim remained active. His invitations had declined with remarkable speed. Once hosts understood that receiving him might require defending him. Lady Miriam had offered no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. She remained excluded from Denby House and Ketteridge House, and several women who once admired her discipline had discovered pressing reasons not to call. Constance did not mistake social discomfort for repentance. Punishment could expose a person without changing one. Felicity had written 3 letters before Constance answered. Their first meeting afterward had lasted 20 minutes and contained more silence than speech. Their second had lasted an hour. Forgiveness had not arrived like a door flung open. It returned as a cautious series of choices. Felicity no longer asked Constance to forget what fear had cost. Constance no longer treated one brave statement as payment for years of silence. They were learning how to become sisters, without requiring one of them to disappear. That afternoon, Felicity entered the artist's room with Matthew at her side and stopped before the corrected score. Her gloved fingers hovered above Constance's printed name without touching it. "It looks right," she said. "It is right." Felicity nodded. Mamma sent another note. Theodore's attention sharpened, but he did not speak. Constance had not asked him to intervene in her correspondence, and he never did. "What did she say?" Constance asked. "That she remains willing to forgive us if we cease humiliating the family." Constance gave a quiet breath that held no amusement. "Then nothing has changed." "No." Felicity looked toward Matthew. "I sent it back unopened after reading the first line." "You opened it if you read the first line," Matthew observed. Felicity gave him a wounded look. "This is not the moment for accuracy." "It is always the moment for accuracy in this family." Constance laughed before she could stop herself. The sound softened Felicity's face. For one brief instant, they were not witnesses, victims, or daughters negotiating the remains of a household. They were sisters sharing a private absurdity. Felicity reached for Constance's hand. She did not assume the gesture would be welcomed. Constance accepted it. "I'm glad you kept Norcombe on the corrected edition," Felicity said. "So am I. Perhaps one day the name will mean something better. Names do not become honorable by wishing. People must behave honorably beneath them." Felicity absorbed the answer and nodded. "Then I'll try." It was not a promise of perfection. Constance trusted it more for that reason. Their marriage had taken place 6 weeks earlier by special license, in a quiet London ceremony attended only by the necessary family and witnesses. Theodore had offered grandeur because it was available, then accepted simplicity because it was what Constance chose. Their settlement had required more discussion than the ceremony. Constance retained control of her royalties, future compositions, personal correspondence, notebook, and property purchased from her earnings. Theodore held no claim over her catalogue. He had read each provision without wounded pride and asked whether any protection remained incomplete. When the solicitor finished, Constance had looked across the desk and understood that Theodore's love was no longer expressed by taking responsibility away from her. It was expressed by making room for her authority beside his own. The concert room filled before dusk. Patrons who had attended the public reckoning now returned to hear music without scandal attached to its value. Others came because fashion had finally decided that female authorship could be admired once a duchess made it respectable. Constance recognized the hypocrisy and used it. If rank opened doors that talent had found barred, she would hold those doors open for women who possessed neither title nor powerful husband. The publisher announced the new annual prize before the final set. It would support an unpublished gentlewoman composer, selected from anonymous submissions and administered through the music house rather than the ducal household. Theodore had provided the initial funds. Constance had written the rules. No winner would be required to offer gratitude, patronage allegiance, or social obedience in exchange for recognition. The room applauded. Constance watched two older women exchange startled glances and one young lady press a program to her chest as though it contained permission. That response mattered more than approval from any noble row. When Constance sat at the pianoforte, she placed the silver tuning fork beside the corrected score. It remained exactly as her mother had left it, small, bright, and honest. She struck it once and found the pitch. Summer lanterns began beneath her hands. The bridge that Sir Barnaby could not explain now opened with confidence, carried by musicians who knew whose direction they followed. The final phrase returned home without surrendering its light. Theodore listened from the front row. He did not watch the audience. He watched her. Later, the musicians performed her new quadrille. The printed program named her as Constance Ketteridge, Duchess of Ketteridge, but beneath the title appeared a second line she had required. Formerly Miss Constance Norcombe, composer of the corrected Ketteridge variations. Nothing had been erased to make marriage appear redemptive. Love had not replaced justice. It had grown where justice made truth possible. The last guests departed after midnight. Servants collected programs and lowered several candles, while a few musicians remained near the gallery to pack their instruments. Constance stood alone for a moment on the emptied floor. At the edge of the room, the tuning fork lay beside the score, bearing her name. Theodore approached, but stopped before entering the space around her. "No audience," he said, "not unless the footmen have developed a dangerous interest in quadrilles." One footman looked firmly toward the wall. Constance held out her hand. "Will you dance with me, Theodore?" His expression softened. "Only if the choice is entirely yours." "It is." He placed his hand in hers. The musicians, understanding without instruction, began the new quadrille quietly. Constance and Theodore moved onto the empty floor, where she had once refused him before half of London. There was no humiliation now, no demand, and no question whose answer belonged to whom. His hand rested at the proper distance. Hers remained in his by choice. They completed the first figure, then the second, smiling when the reduced number of dancers made the pattern faintly ridiculous. "We are ruining the geometry," Theodore murmured. "I composed it. I reserve the right." A terrifying principle. You married me despite ample warning. I married you because of it. When the music ended, Constance did not step away. She moved into his arms and held him with the same freedom that had once allowed her to refuse his hand. Theodore embraced her, waiting even now for the pressure of her choice before deepening his hold. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I love you too." She lifted her face and kissed him, gently, at first, then with the quiet certainty of a woman who had reclaimed not only her name, but her right to give affection without losing herself inside it. When they parted, the musicians had politely turned toward their cases. Theodore touched his forehead to hers. "Was that entirely your choice? Do not become insufferable. I'm a duke. It remains an occupational danger." Constance laughed and took his hand again. Across the room, the silver tuning fork rested beside the corrected score. Her name stood beneath the title in permanent ink. Their shadows stretched together across the polished floor, but neither consumed the other. The final dance belonged to the woman whose music, whose future, and whose answer were entirely her own.